Welcome to the Doghouse. Have a listen as we take a look at life, love, and art in all its forms. Here's your host, the Rock Dog, Andrew Davis.
This is the Doghouse. I'm the Rock Dog, Andrew Davis, and I'm joined today, Kurtis Baute, who makes videos, but they're scientific videos. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Where are you from?
I'm from Ontario originally. Grew up on a farm out there, but I'm living in Vancouver now.
How was childhood out on a farm? You worked hard, worked the farm, or?
Yeah, I developed a pretty hard work ethic, which is, I think, what makes my channel kind of odd sometimes. Because, I when people say like, "Oh, let's do this really big project," oh no, that's too hard. I'm just like, yeah, this is perfect for me. That's my bread and butter.
I noticed one of your videos where you took a picture of yourself every day from the age of 17. Take us through that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you want me to start when I'm 17? I'm just joking. No, yeah, I used to track all of my statistics. So things like I did daily photos. I tracked my daily happiness. I tracked, my heart rate throughout the day. I used to track everything because I was, and still kind of am, obsessed with data and how it can affect our lives. I don't think people tend to think in those sorts of like scientific ways, especially when it regards their life, but there's a lot we can learn about ourselves if we spend the time.
Okay, so what do we learn with this data?
What did I learn from that?
Yes.
Learned a lot of things. Some of it might be intuitive to people. Like I learned that spending more time outside and more time with my friends and more time biking, all those things make me happier. There's some things that I was kind of surprised about. Like when I thought that in the summers I would be happier, but really like it wasn't that way. It just depended on, how much time I was actually outside for. And that doesn't really matter with the weather all that much. So there's a lot of like pretty personal things that I came out with that, and kind of, improved my life pretty significantly from that project.
Do you have any science training?
I did my Master's of Science through the University of Guelph and got my name on a couple peer-reviewed papers. And I mean, I try to be, pretty scientific in the work that I do now as well, but it's different not being in academia.
It's kind of like a Bill Nye thing.
Yeah, that's the kind of idea. I try to do cover basic science concepts in the most engaging ways that I can come up with. It's kind of like Bill Nye. Bill Nye is an idol of mine. I appreciate that comparison.
Oh, right on. Maybe you'll get to meet him one day. That'd be pretty cool.
That's the dream. That'd be great.
The other video I noticed too, and we'll get to the bubble one in a minute, but 24 hours without touching plastic.
Yeah, so that for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I could probably do that. I won't use plastic water bottles, but the more you think about it, the more difficult it becomes. Like you can't use your cell phone because it's made of plastic, and even most of your clothes have plastic polymers in them, and pretty much everything that we use on a daily basis has some degree of plastic. So when I started researching how I would do this, the more I looked into it, the more it was kind of terrifying how much plastic is around us and even in us. So that ended up being me just walking around my apartment in a towel, in an all cotton towel, and being really, really terribly bored.
That would be, yeah. I mean, I'm holding a pen right now, so there you go. That's how easy it is to touch plastic. Out the.
I try to do.
Go ahead.
I try to do projects like that just to like raise awareness about the issues of like environmental issues. Like we use plastic for so many things that just get thrown out immediately, right? And for me, it's like, I don't recommend that everybody try to walk around in towels all the time and, not touch plastic, but there's got to be some things we can do to better the environment.
Right, because there's a lot of plastic out there. Most of it's in the ocean. So what can we do other than, not use plastic water bottles? What other steps can we take?
There's so many. I mean, we can just avoid buying food that's packaged in plastic. Like, I was at the store the other day looking for cauliflower, and cauliflower is grown. It has leaves that cover it up naturally, right? And yet we cut off those leaves so we can see its nice white like its nice white body, I guess.
Yeah.
And then we wrap it in plastic.
Wrap it in plastic.
Like, it has a natural wrapper, you know?
Climate, I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to fill in this blank. Okay? Climate
I'm on it.
All right. Climate change is
The worst thing humans have ever faced.
yes. It a lot of people don't believe it, and why is that? Why do people go it's a hoax and they fall into the Donald Trump trap?
So I think there's kind of two reasons. Well, there's three reasons for coming up with that. One is that, you know, they're just not very educated, and that's unfortunately a big problem that we face in this modern day world. You know, a lot of people don't have any sort of science literacy. And then the other, which I guess feeds into that, is that there's major money to be had in, you know, denying climate change. Fossil fuel companies have been pumping money into misinformation since the 1970s. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's what it all comes down to, unfortunately. And the third thing is I think there's genuinely some people that have read a lot, and it's just overwhelming, and they don't want to believe it, so they choose not to.
Yeah.
Because it's so pervasive in our society. Like, we use fossil fuels for everything, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of scary. People don't like change.
Do you think it would be easy to switch over to something else? I mean, not easy, but definitely doable as we go away from that, and we could do it rather quickly.
Yeah, I think it's 100% doable. It's not a really even a question. It's just something that the question is, are we going to, and when? Because we will eventually be forced to. I mean, we're going to run out of fossil fuels for one thing, but it's just a matter of time. And the longer we wait, the worse the scenario is going to be for us.
Right.
So I think, you know, we need to do something as soon as possible, really.
Because
the technology's all there. Like, all the options are here.
So we should just migrate whatever's going on in the fossil fuel industry, move all those workers into renewable energy resources, and everybody wins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we already have the tech. You know, we need more solar panels. Okay, let's take those fossil fuel employees and make them, like, teach them how to build solar panels. You know, there's that, and then there's also there's a lot to it. Like, it is a complicated issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have an entire society that's built around buying stuff that's, you know, shipped around the world, and it's made of plastic, which is made from fossil fuels. It's complicated, but there's a pretty clear way forward. It just takes some research, really.
How do you plan your videos? So you come up with a thought, and then what do you do from there?
So usually what happens, I come about my ideas fairly organically, I would say. Normally I'm in the middle, you know, I'm trying to sleep, it's 4 a.m, and I think, what if I shield myself in a jar? Or what if I set up thousands of dominoes to tell the timeline of the universe? And these ideas end up keeping me up all night, and then those are the ideas that I have to make. I really like metaphors. I think metaphors are what got me into science in the first place. So I really try to think about that. And whenever someone, you know, tries to explain something as a metaphor, I'm like, what if I actually built that metaphor? So yeah, that's kind of where things originate. And then it depends on the project in terms of how I end up doing it. But sometimes it means I have to go to Saskatchewan with my bike to measure the world, and that takes a lot of planning. And you know, but I try to do it. I get good enough at biking that I can bike across Saskatchewan so that I can set up 2 sundials and, you know, figure out the circumference of the Earth using some math. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of work, and sometimes some sweat. But at the end of the day, it's a wonderful job, and I'm so fortunate, and I'm so glad that I can do it.
And you got a good team behind you, I assume, or is it all you?
I have a lot of support. I have a lot of support from my friends and from patrons on Patreon, and I just thankfully hired I'm contracting a photographer who is so wonderful, because up until now it's really just been me with the camera, with some help from my partner, but for the most part it's just been me doing this, so it's good.
All right, so you come up with the metaphor. What would it be like if I was stuck inside a jar? And then you kind of did it. And you did it here in the Comox Valley, right? When you stuck yourself in the big plastic jar. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've had this jar on my desk for years, which is just full of plants, and it's been sealed, and they've been living like it's an entirely enclosed ecosystem. And I kept staring at it, thinking like, what would this be like if the jar was big enough that I could climb inside of it? How long could I survive in a jar, the size of a U-Haul trailer? And then that idea literally, it kept me up for weeks really. And so I went to my brother's house, my brother and sister-in-law's house, and I built this massive container, and I covered it in greenhouse plastic. I filled it with about 200 plants and a bunch of air monitoring equipment. And I got my friend who's a paramedic to watch me. I should say, as I always do, don't try to do this in your own backyard if you don't, just don't try to do this at home. I've had a lot of I spent a month basically figuring out how to do this as safely as possible.
What did your data show you on this? I don't think you had enough plants, did you?
Well, so it's complicated. My original plan when I first started brainstorming it was to try and stay in there for 3 days, because a jar that size, it was 30,000 liters. It's 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet cubed. And the jar that size does have enough oxygen for you to survive, right? But the problem, as I learned in my research, is that carbon dioxide levels, from breathing, from exhaling, rise pretty rapidly, and that is why people suffocate. So I realized pretty soon that it would probably only last about a day if my plants weren't really helping. And it was a cloudy day. So even though I had 200 plants, I was competing with the plants for the oxygen. And carbon dioxide levels just went up and up and up until I could no longer even measure them on all of my equipment. So I didn't even know. It was above 1%,
wow.
Which is 20 times. Yeah, it's 20 times more carbon dioxide than we normally have in the atmosphere. And so at that point, it was this is no longer safe, and I had to get out of there.
And what was the final count hour-wise?
It was 14 hours, just over 14 hours.
It's amazing. In that short period of time.
It's amazing that it was that short. I think that it's kind of a lesson for everyone that they're like, oh, 200 plants. How many days was he in there? It's no. Plants aren't that good at taking up carbon dioxide, and just one person can pump out way more CO2 just from their breath than that many plants can uptake. And that's kind of the lesson that we're learning with climate change too, right?
Right. What's an experiment you'd like to do next? What's cooking in your mind?
Oh, there are so many. I've got a few that I don't know that I really want to talk about. I've got one that I will talk about, which I've been working on for basically the whole year. It relates to the plastic video. So I spent time not touching plastic. I'm going to spend a few days not eating anything that contains plastic. And that might sound like kind of absurd because who eats plastic? Turns out that the average person eats about a credit card worth of plastic every week.
What?
Yeah, because it's just, you eat, all your food is packaged in plastic, and the water that you drink from your water bottles has little microplastic fragments in them. So by the end of the week, you've eaten about a credit card worth. It's in sea salt because there's so much in the ocean that when we harvest salt from it, there's plastic in it. So it's actually extremely hard to avoid plastic to that extent. And that's my goal. I'm currently trying to figure out, so there was a study that looked at 8 people around the world. They took stool samples from them and found microplastics in each of those 8 people's poo. And my goal is actually right now to find somehow, some way to actually look for microplastics in my poo, which is not something I really want to be doing, but I think it's worth the cause.
I think it's the collection is probably the hardest part, I think, with that. Stick a plate under there.
Not looking forward to that, but if all goes well, I'll at least learn how, if it's even possible, how difficult it is to avoid plastic in our bodies, which is it's pretty terrifying, really.
Actually, it is.
We don't really have any idea of how bad it is for us yet. So we'll see.
If you had a message for the kids out there, What would you tell them about science and climate change and plastic and their world that they will inherit one day?
I'll say two things. One is that science opens doors that they might not even know are there. And I don't just mean this in terms of their career. I mean, like, it will improve the way you see the world. It makes life brighter and more wonderful. And the other is that when you do learn more about science, it's a pretty freaky future that they have to deal with. And that is our generation's fault. But it's something that everyone is going to have to work together to solve. And we got to start working on it.
And working right now on it.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay, so you're on YouTube. You have a website, if you want to say what that is.
Yeah, so you can find me at kurtisbaute.com or at Kurtis Baute on YouTube. That's Kurtis, last name Baute. Or if you just search Kurtis in a jar, Kurtis with a K, you'll find me.
Thank you very much for talking to me today. It was really nice to get to know you, and your videos are fantastic, and even I'm learning stuff. When I was watching the jar experiment and with how quickly that CO2 level was rising, it was just, and to see your impairment as well because of it was quite fascinating.
Yeah, that was pretty freaky. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was such a pleasure, Andrew.
You've been listening to The Doghouse with Andrew Davis.